Hello and welcome to State of the Economy. Today we have with us Dr. Judge Ahluwalia, chairperson of ICRIER, a very prominent economic policy think tank, where she currently leads a team of urban researchers. Ms. Isher Ahluwalia has been passionately involved in the subject of the transformation of urban India in the last few years, following which she has just come out with a book which is called Transformation of Our Urban Cities, Postcards of Change. These are a series of columns that she has written in the last 4 years in the Indian Express group, and she's going to talk to us about her work. Welcome to our show,
Thank you,
Dr. Isher Ahluwalia. So, please tell us about your experience in writing about these projects, these changes that have happened in Indian cities in various urban infrastructure services. And these are places where you've personally visited and you actually witnessed change and you then compiled them. So, in a sense, you've been an academic, you've been a reporter, you've gone and cross-checked facts like a journalist. So what has been your experience like?
Well, first of all, Venu, it's been a very fulfilling experience. When I was asked to chair the Committee on Urban Infrastructure and Services in 2008, and we submitted our report in 2011, remember that was the time when JNNURM, the Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission, had just kicked in, and that meant that for the first time, urban India was getting a little bit of funding from the Government of India on condition that the state will put in some supplementary funding and local governments will also put some funds.
That was the beginning of your...
That was the beginning. And what I found was that there was a lot of confusion but a lot of excitement about JNNURM. That's when I decided that I really need to go down at the local government level, look at a particular project. Let us say if they're trying to give water round the clock, 24/7 water. Then I asked the Ministry of Urban Development, tell me any 2 or 3 projects which are on track, which have actually achieved what they set out to achieve. Yeah. And that's how it started. I went to Karnataka. There are 3 cities in which they were doing a pilot experiment of giving round the clock water. And like that, then I visited some other cities like Pune.
So you focused on urban services,
urban service delivery, and not just urban infrastructure. Because urban infrastructure would mean that you provide the distribution network in order to give water round the clock. But if you actually don't end up giving the water, this means that there is something wrong with managing that infrastructure. So our focus was service delivery, which required urban infrastructure investment, but investment was not all that was needed. You needed better governance. And at that time, what I found was that wherever the state government was actually providing an enabling environment, they were holding the hands of local government. Wherever there was capacity at the city level to plan and manage, you could actually see the results. But where these 2 items were missing, if there was not enough capacity to plan and if state government was not playing ball, no matter how much money the center gave, you would not see the change.
Which is why I guess the Prime Minister in his foreword has emphasized that capacity to change things is as important as money flowing in from the center, right?
Yes. Yeah. That was the committee's conclusion also, that investment is important, financing that investment is also important, but the whole financing issue is intimately linked with governance.
So Isher, can you tell us, after doing such a comprehensive exercise, studying pilot projects which are working in many places, not working so well in other places, what's your conclusion about the broad trend in regard to urban transformation in India? Is it satisfactory, or is the glass half full, or what would be your observation?
It's far from half full, it's close to empty. Let me say that. The state of service delivery in urban India is abysmal. What I have done is to take 40 case studies in which I have shown that when you put in a little bit of money but much better governance and where you have human leadership, it is not difficult to transform. So while I get a lot of inspiration from these studies, the real challenge is how to replicate these elsewhere, how to adapt them to local conditions, and how to get this on a broader scale.
In a sense, you're saying these are some of the islands of excellence, yes, in some sense. And you're suggesting that these need to be replicated on a much wider scale.
Yes, what they prove is that you don't need to dig up an example, let's say, from Phnom Penh in Cambodia to say that they turned around their war-ravaged water distribution system and now they are giving water round the clock through reforms in a public utility. Now, Malkapur shows us that in Maharashtra, in a small town of 40,000 people, you have done the same thing. So you don't need to say that this can happen in Cambodia, but it can't happen in India. It's happening in India. So why is it not happening in more places? That's the question.
And more specifically, Ishar, what is it that has made some of these projects that you've studied work? You said, okay, you said governance, and you said participation by the local bodies as well as cooperation by the state government. Now, are there some other attributes which you think have made these projects work, whether it's in the area of sanitation or solid waste management, water services, what have you?
Take the example of solid waste management in Pune. Now, you know, it all started with 2 university lecturers campaigning in Pune to segregate dry waste from wet waste, because they used to see rag pickers, you know, picking things out of this unsegregated mixed waste, and they said, why don't we start segregating? And then they would get recyclers to come and look at the dry waste. But later on, when the municipality woke up to it and came up with the technology of biomethanation, you know, which is a way of using wet waste to convert it into compost and generate biogas, which gives you electricity. So what Pune has done now is, very successfully, they have 20 plus biomethanation plants which give both organic fertilizer and they give electricity which meets the requirement of street lighting.
Waste to energy.
Yeah, it's waste to energy in a decentralized manner.
Decentralized manner.
Pune also has waste to energy at the high-tech level, which is the cleanest energy that you can produce.
So decentralization seems to be a necessary condition?
Decentralized waste to compost and biogas is possible if you can segregate the waste into dry and wet. When you can't segregate it, now there are technologies available like the Concord Blue, which Pune also has, where you can produce syngas, which is the cleanest gas out of that waste. So, you know, what you do depends on the character of your waste. How far do you have to transport that waste?
So, there are a whole lot of factors involved here. We take a small break here and we'll come back. Please don't go and keep watching RSTV. Welcome back to State of the Economy. We are having a conversation with Dr. Ishar Judge Ahluwalia on her recent book, which captures transformation of important urban services projects around the country. Ms. Ahluwalia, you're saying something about, in continuation of what you...
The solid waste management. I just wanted to tell you that after I wrote about the solid waste management practices in Pune, I happened to meet the Chief Minister of Assam somewhere in Delhi, and I was so happy to hear from him that after reading this column, he decided to make a visit to Pune, see the biomethanation plants, and then they put up similar plants in Guwahati, and he wanted our urban team to bring a workshop for the northeastern states, which we did. So one of the things that we are doing is we are trying to share best practices across the states and cities of India, and we are finding tremendous reception at the level of the state government and chief ministers.
It's interesting that you're saying this. So, I also noticed that of all the experiments or all the projects that you've spoken about in this book, most of them are in the south or in the west, Pune, Gujarat. There doesn't seem to be any experiment, say in Bihar, for instance, or maybe in some of the Madhya Pradesh or...
Madhya Pradesh, I have quite a few.
You have?
Yes.
Okay.
See, you are right that I don't have much from Haryana, Punjab, and from Delhi there are a few on the biodiversity park, for example.
I'm coming to a question from that. Is it that some states are more alive to these experiments than the other states? Is there?
Yes, I would say that if you take everything into account, there are 6 or 7 states where there seems to be more happening in terms of transformation, even though at micro level, and these would be Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, Maharashtra, big time. You know, in Maharashtra, I found a number of urban transformation practices
Satara,
in
Pune,
different sectors. Yes.
And Karnataka?
Karnataka, yes. So these would be the major states.
So would it be sort of right to say that in these states where more such experiments are happening, successful urban delivery, service delivery experiments, some of the attributes that you spoke about, which come together to make these things happen, have taken roots in these states, like more decentralized functioning, more literacy, more political awareness at the local level, more urban politics, healthy urban politics?
I don't know about healthy urban politics, for example. I'm not sure. This is not an area of my specialization, but I wouldn't say that Maharashtra necessarily has healthy urban politics, but certainly awareness and good administration and decentralization and human leadership I found in the case of...
At some level, there has to be pressure from below for the larger community to come together. For instance, in a fascinating chapter, Magarapatta, you know, a whole new people came together and created a new township, right? And it was a classic case of public-private partnership kicking off. So my suggestion is that must have happened because there was some basic awareness coming from below and motivating everybody, all the stakeholders, to participate in that experiment. I mean, would it be fair to suggest that?
In the particular case of Magarpatta, it was actually the farming community, and there were 1 or 2 individuals. There's a particular person called Satish Magar.
Yeah, I know. You mentioned him in your chapter.
Now, in fact, he was able to get the community together to say that we will be the developers ourselves. Because
that's the local leadership, right?
Yeah. So this was a case of leadership plus one other factor.
And possibly a cooperative culture which is very prevalent in Maharashtra.
Yes. And they had one other factor which I think was quite important. They had as their benefactor, well-wisher, Mr. B.G. Deshmukh, who was first Chief Secretary Maharashtra, then he was Cabinet Secretary, then he was Principal Secretary to Prime Minister. So over a period of 7 to 8 years, he could help them realize their dream. So I think these 2 factors were...
So can you...
but let me say one other thing.
Can you take this experiment, like you said, that you're also now trying to ensure the states share best practices. Can you take Magarpatta and take it to some, say, legislators in Haryana and tell them, okay, can you do this?
I don't know about that, but I do want to say one thing, which is that all the other factors that you were mentioning, awareness, leadership and all, I think Gujarat is another state where I found that to be particularly...
Traditionally, Gujarat has...
Take the city of Surat. as I say in my chapter on Surat, this is a city which has visited hell and come back several times. And
the plague and after the plague.
Yes, and they had the benefit of Mr. S.R. Rao, who was municipal commissioner there. He
was recently Commerce Secretary, right?
Yes, I think he's recently retired. But this man not only got Surat out of its crisis, but somehow he was able to create institutional mechanisms which have survived. And that was a very nice thing to see, you know, in Surat.
And is it happening in other places? For instance, in one chapter, you speak about a fascinating experiment in Kanpur, where 7 lakh households, their solid waste management experiment was tried for 7 lakh households, did well, and then you say it slipped back and it fell apart. It was you said it was a good public-private partnership which was about to take off, and then it, why does this happen?
Now, my understanding is that in the case of Kanpur, after the change in government, the new political leadership in UP was not in favor of the particular private partner. Now, what I feel is that whenever…
Very much possible, all the time happening,
you know,
in India.
when you have PPP, it is very important to go for competitive bidding, so that if everything is in the open and transparent, Kanpur will not happen. I think that in Kanpur, it was a bad example of PPP for a number of reasons.
Okay. And what about PPPs in other states that you might have encountered? I mean, are they good PPPs?
Public-private partnership in Nagpur for water is doing very well. That also was challenged because, you know, there was political opposition and they did not want user charges to be raised. But it took them a little longer, it took them a year, but they were able to put it back on track. And I think that one is doing well.
We'll take a small break here. Please don't go away and keep watching RSTV. Welcome back to State of the Economy. Ishar, you've also spoken in your book about the way India is urbanizing. Now, you use a very interesting term, Lawaris towns. Now, Lawaris towns would mean towns
जिसका कोई वारिस
नहीं है. I mean, without
a patron.
Patron, yeah. Now, probably you are hinting at the fact that nearly 80%, 90% of the new urban centers that have come up in the last 5-6 years are panchayat administered. They have not moved to a municipal administered framework. Now, this seems to be very unique to India. Why is this happening in India? All the new cities that have urban centers that have come up, you give statistics.
Venu, this is a very important question that you have asked. And I remember the Bihar Chief Minister, Nitish Kumar, telling me that when we make a place from a Gram Panchayat to a Nagar Panchayat, a few months later, these people come back to us and say, you know, please take us back to being Gram Panchayat because all the money is in the rural sector. We get lots of funds to spend, but the minute you make us into a Nagar Panchayat, all that money disappears. And as a result…
And you're so right. And I remember at your book function, the release function, the finance minister gave another example of Chennai corporation, municipal corporation, where a rural Gram Panchayat run urban center was merged with the main Chennai corporation. They said, no, we don't want because we get lost here. So please revert us to being a rural panchayat administered unit, right? Is that the problem you're talking about?
Yes, you know what is happening is that as the cities grow, just the area beyond a city is ready for urban infrastructure. You know, it's craving for urban roads, urban sewerage, so that you have a proper extension, proper planned urbanization. But these areas are not really willing to switch over to being called municipalities.
Because of a lot of funds going to rural areas.
So they are towns as defined in the census. They ought to be now given a municipality to take charge of that town and demand urban infrastructure and deliver urban infrastructure. But because of this political, resistance to being graduated to an urban area, what is happening is that these areas end up living as villages when they are actually census towns.
But do they develop urban characteristics?
Of course they do, because it's unplanned urbanization. They develop urban needs, they develop urban bypasses, solutions when you don't have planning.
But my question is it necessary that they actually join the bigger urban agglomeration, or do you think it makes sense for them to develop as independent clusters and by and by become urban through various urban services provided there?
You see, they can either be made into, say, a Nagar Panchayat, which later on can be linked up to an adjacent municipality, or a few Nagar Panchayats can be brought together. And you have to plan in a metropolitan context where you have a main city and then you have these other urban centers.
Cities.
Right.
So you're saying at some stage they necessarily will have to come under some municipal administration.
Yes.
So this can be an interim arrangement.
Exactly.
Remaining under some rural panchayat administration.
I think actually it's not desirable. When they are census towns, they should really be given a statutory municipal body to look after their needs. Only then can you plan for the urban sector.
And another critical question, is there a robust, healthy politics, urban politics that is building around these clusters that you just spoke about, rural clusters, developing urban characteristics, but not yet, they have not become municipal centers. Now, in this regard, I just want to draw your attention to Chinese experience, where they give local authorities powers. The state develops trunk infrastructure, develops the land to a certain extent, and then sells the land and raises, and the provinces raise revenues from land, and then use that to sort of then drive the urban services program. Now, is that happening in India? Are local governments raising enough money by selling parcels of developed land?
No, I'm afraid before JNNURM came, there was nothing happening at the local government level.
Now something is happening.
Now something is happening, but my worry is that unless we get our second tier and third tier cities taking off in a planned manner, we will also convert them into the sort of mess that our large cities are in. And I think the state governments realize that, but I don't think that they are able to do what is needed. One of the recommendations that we made in our committee was that when you have the goods and services tax, the GST, coming in, a small part of that GST should be automatically transferred to the third tier, to the local government. So they have some basic oxygen, because in South Africa, in Indonesia, they have predictable, guaranteed transfers to the local government. In our country, the constitutional amendment of 1992 has transferred the responsibility for the delivery of these services to the local governments, to cities, but on funding, the constitution has basically said that state should set up a state finance commission and that should transfer some funds. And the states are unwilling to really, give this funding to the local government.
What's your estimate? You've done so much work on urbanization. Today, 30% of our population is urban.
34.
34, right? And it will be about 40%, 41% by 2030. In your estimate, how many brand new cities would India need in the next, say, 15 years?
I don't like to answer questions which I have not actually done research on. I am sure we need new cities, And as you know, the Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor, along the corridor they are planning 7 cities. Amitabh Kant is really engaging with a number of state governments. We need that. But my view is that even if you say that we need 20 new cities, you still need to fix our existing cities, and what is more important, you need to fix the synergy between cities and villages. Because just setting up new cities will not do. Our problem has to be holistic.
It has to be the larger ecosystem needs to urban ecosystem.
And our politicians have to realize that there is no salvation for the rural sector unless you link them with a planned strategy on urbanization.
Absolutely, there is no doubt. Thank you very much, Dr. Judge Ahluwalia, for talking to us. And that's all we have in this edition of State of the Economy. We'll be back with you next week. Thanks for watching.